Andrew Mercado is a US Army veteran who served both on active duty and in the reserves as an 88M motor transport operator from 2012 to 2020 with one tour overseas. His journey into journalism began when George Floyd was murdered in his home city of Minneapolis in 2020. He then had the desire to report on the subsequent riots, unrest, and protests. It's a journey that has now led him to Ukraine, where he's become a powerful voice in bringing the war to life on his YouTube channel. Welcome to Slick and Curtain. All our content is now available on podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And please do, of course, like and subscribe. And it's super important now to comment, because apparently that's what the algorithm wants to see. Andrew, welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's kick off with the journey, because I'd love to explore your time in Ukraine, but the Ukraine war wasn't the trigger for your I would say sort of odyssey into independent media, independent journalism. So what actually triggered you to go into this?
Yeah, it was 2020. I was sitting at home playing Call of Duty Warzone with my friends because we were on COVID lockdown. I was in school to become an addiction counselor because I myself struggle with, well, I did. I'm in recovery, but I was addicted to pretty hard substance for a few years. I got out of active duty military and just fell into the wrong crowd, made wrong friends, all the typical stereotypical stuff that led me to a bad path. But I corrected, course corrected. I got myself into a treatment program, and then that inspired me to go to school to actually become a counselor and try to give back to veterans, right? Because I'm a veteran that struggled with addiction, and I learned a lot, and I wanted to give that back to other veterans and like teach them how I learned basically, and try to make it easier or how so they can understand a little better. Because I went to treatment at a VA facility before, veterans care facility, and I didn't really learn a lot, and I didn't feel like it was the best program. So I wanted to specifically go back to that and provide what I've learned in school and also my own personal journey to that place. But COVID happened and the lockdown, and I didn't. School kind of went by the wayside for me because I don't do well at home doing homework. I liked getting up in the morning, taking a shower, going to school. I had a position at the school. I was the president of the Veterans Club. I was the treasurer of the Addiction Counseling Club. For the first time involved in school, like on all levels. All levels I was involved there, extracurricular activities. I was even speeches, which I'm not good at public speaking. I don't like standing on a stage and talking to a lot of people. But I was doing things like that. So I was really trying to like transforming, doing things that I was uncomfortable with doing, but I felt like because I was on a new path that I should do it anyways and just try it and see what happens. So COVID happened, and then I'm at home right now. I'm playing Call of Duty. I just kind of had to set the stage for you because it was a unique situation where I'm at home playing Call of Duty. So I'm playing Warzone, and I get the news comes out, George Floyd murdered, and it was viral. Like when George Floyd was killed, it was on Facebook Live. It was a live stream. And it was like a 12-minute stream, and it was the most I think the most viral, like in your face police murder of a civilian you could see. And it was like, holy, like this was live streamed. So, and this happened in my home city in Minneapolis in Minnesota. So the day went by, there was some people went out and had held a rally and protested at the police station. Cars were spray painted, but journalists or people that identified as journalists at the time were like pepper sprayed and tear gassed. And I was like, whoa, like what's really going on down there? I'm like, why am I at home? And so I'm sitting there playing Warzone. And my friends, they're like, hey, are you going down there? I was like, we'll go down there with you. They didn't go down. I went down by myself, but I went down there and I said, all right, I'm just going to see what's going on. I'm tired of being at home. I'm tired of these COVID lockdown briefs because we had to watch those every day, just watching numbers go up. And I was just tired of it. I'm tired of sitting at home in lockdown, not doing anything, playing Call of Duty, which I like that, but I was bored of it. So I went downtown Minneapolis, and I went down to the scene where George Floyd was killed. And this was the next day. This was like the following day. And there was people down there. It was packed. Like I'm talking, I've never seen it because I've never been to a protest. I've never been to a political event in person. I was pretty active growing up with politics. Like I volunteered for John McCain's campaign. I was pretty active in the Republican side of things because my family was, my parents were, they had us do that. So like, but beyond that, I never went to a protest before or anything like this. So I've never seen something like this in person, only ever seen it how the news shows it or how the news broadcasts it. So I'm there, I'm looking around, like I'm just seeing a whole lot of things I've never seen before. And then my friend who I was playing Warzone with messages me. He's like, "Hey, you should live stream. You should go live on Facebook." I was like, "Oh man, how do I do that?" There's a live button on Facebook, and like I think I can like I was trying to mess with it for like 20 minutes. I had to have someone help me that was at 38th in Chicago. Like, how do I do this? Like, I need to go live. So then I was live, had my phone for like 20 minutes. We're streaming like again, they just had like dancing and people were doing all types of cultural things were happening at the scene where George Floyd was killed. And then I'm leaving because I'm like, all right, this is enough. Like this was a lot. I'm pretty overstimulated because it's just a lot happening. And then this guy asked me for a lighter because I still smoked cigarettes at the time. And so I give him a lighter and he said, "Hey, you going down to the third precinct?" Which was like maybe 10, 15 minutes. No, like 10 minutes away down Lake Street from where George Floyd was killed. And this was like the big scene of like where the riots kicked off and like buildings burned and shit. So this is before it started. So I'm I get I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm going down there, but I guess I could go check it out. So then I go down to the third precinct. My phone battery's at like 10%, 15%, like almost dead. I wasn't prepared for this at all. I wasn't prepared to go down there. So same thing. I walked out there and I just went live on Facebook again, walking down Lake Street towards the precinct, and there was riot police on the rooftop, and they had like a 40 millimeter grenade launcher with the tear gas in it, just launching at people. And there's like hundreds of people. I'm talking people everywhere. And like across the street, the auto zone was getting looted. Like this is when looting started. And I'm like, holy like I've never seen this before in life. Like I've seen it in movies. I've seen it in TV shows, like when people are like running into buildings and like grabbing shit and running out, and like that happened. And then like it was just chaos from that moment on. But I was streaming all of it. I was experiencing it, but at the same time, I was live on Facebook, and I was just carrying my phone around like this, like I'm looking at it all, but the phone is capturing it with me because I'm just keeping it on. I mean, I had to go get battery packs, and people that were watching my stream were like, "What's your Cash App? What's your Venmo? We'll donate to you so you can go." And like they would. People were donating like to my Cash App, Venmo, and I'm running to get shit at the. I'm sorry if I swear. I'm running to get things at the store, cords, or charger bricks, so I can stay out. People were keeping me out there. They were keeping me out there because I was live, and I think I had 68,000 concurrent viewers,
That's
72.
huge. That's
Yeah.
huge. Yeah.
And that was on my third stream ever. And then the fourth stream was 72,000. And that was like the following night when it was even crazier. So it was about a week long of riots, of actual buildings burning, looting, violence. The police didn't even go there after the first day. They stopped going to downtown. So it was a lawless area. Like it was the true, like lawless. I'm talking just unfettered violence I've seen for like 7 days in a row. But then after that, the message switched to, okay, violence done. Now that actually the people in the that were marching and organizing were like telling the people to stop, like because people were still looting after the seventh day. Like variously, they'd go into buildings that were already looted and see what else was in there, and the crowd was like, stop doing that, like knock it off or whatever. Like, we don't want the police around us. Like it completely changed after the first week to like marching, signs, chanting, like no more looting, no more burning things. So I was like, okay, well, I just went through 7 days of that. I'm about to follow this now and see what's going on with the like what these people are talking about, because that was crazy. That was a week of insanity. And so then I stuck with the protests, and that's what it became. Like the larger Black Lives Matter movement was like these like marching and protesting. But I didn't just stay in Minneapolis. I went to Louisville, Kentucky. I went to the Chop Zone in Seattle, Chop Chaz, that autonomous zone, because there was one in Minneapolis. George Floyd Square was autonomous, but the Chop Chaz was like George Floyd Square on steroids. This was a whole multiple city blocks, big area. And then I also went to Seattle, or I went Portland. in Portland, Oregon. But I just went across the U.S. just following these things, whatever it was, whatever the event was. I mean, when we started getting closer to the elections, there was like this protests or like Trump rallies, for example, and I started going to those as well. I was just streaming everything, like whatever was happening in the U.S. in 2020 and 2021. I was out there, like attending it, streaming it, talking about it, building a community around it, because I knew, like, hey, I don't think this is going to last forever. Like the election will come and go, but I'm going to need to keep this community around. So at the same time, I'm building a community as all on Facebook. I had a Facebook group. I didn't have what I have now. I didn't have a YouTube channel. I didn't have a Discord server. Didn't have a Telegram channel. Didn't have any of this stuff. I only had my Facebook page. That was it. But I knew I had to keep these people around. I knew I had to keep everyone that was watching me, because I'm telling you, as soon as I saw how many people were watching, I said, okay, I guess I'm going to do content now. I guess I'm an online content creator now, because
Content
I'm not,
guy, yeah.
yeah, I guess I'm a content guy. I'm not going to let that go, because like I had kind of set it up for you. I just came out of addiction, just came out of recovery. Like I don't know what I'm doing really, but now I have all these people watching me, and I have this community now, and I'm like, okay, I guess this is what I'm doing. So I went with it and I ran with it, and I stopped going to school. Addiction counseling, maybe maybe I can do a side gig someday with that. But I really just went all in from that moment, on covering current events, because it went from on the ground reporting, and I still do when I can, like when we'll get to it, I'm sure you have questions, but I still do it when I can. But I like to be at home as well here, and go through the news, and that's kind of what it transformed to be like an everyday stream, because I can't get out to events all the time. Like number one, there isn't events all the time. I can't stream everything all the time. But I feel like at least sitting at home, hanging out with the people that followed me from that time, and then now even my coverage of Ukraine has been really good. And I can still go through all the current events and kind
So
of keep what I started going.
there's another election coming up, so the crazy might just begin all over again. It could be,
I'm preparing my viewers for it. I'm probably going to be back out there again doing what I was doing in 2020.
yeah. I mean, it was in a kind of macabre way. It was quite entertaining watching the election the last time around. You just didn't know what insanity was going to happen the next day. But we'll come on to Ukraine in a minute, because I think that's interesting. But what fascinates me here is you say you're not a confident public speaker, or at least you weren't. Suddenly you're sort of thrust into doing this, and it's, no matter how confident someone is, it's actually quite difficult, isn't it, keeping a narrative up? It's quite difficult talking while a camera's pointing at you, or you're pointing at yourself, and just to keep that entertaining, to keep it clear, to say things that are actually going to make sense to an audience, and a broad audience. You've clearly gathered a large and loyal audience. Did you find your sort of style developing, or did it sort of come naturally?
No, I developed over time. Because I didn't I was making Warzone references in my first stream, like Call of Duty references, because that's what I was playing Call of Duty with my friends. So like I'm making jokes of the situation, because that's how I kind of cope with it. I'm also a veteran. I served in the military, so I have dark humor. Like I was out there probably making people upset. I have no idea. I actually don't know the actual. I only saw a few friends in my chat, like as it was going, because it was so many people. I had no idea what was really happening in that chat, but I was making jokes, and I maybe wasn't the best place to be making jokes while things were burning, but that's how I was able to get through it and stay out there for as long as I was. Because I mean, there was a lot of physical and mental repercussions of being out there. I mean, I can't get through a night of sleep without, thinking of something from that time period, or something happens in a dream from that time period. Or I mean, when the buildings were burning, you could feel the heat from the building on your skin like that. You couldn't even be like a half a block away from it, and like I got tan out there from in middle of the night, tan from the sun, from the fires. um
Yeah, so
Sorry.
you got your style, you got your sort of your confidence building
Yeah.
up there. One interesting aspect as well, and I want to explore this whole independent media concept, because I think, you know, having people who are really engaged in a particular topic actually is kind of refreshing. Um, but you have the traditional media, which is very much split along partisan lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, if you're broadly speaking, if you're inclined to vote Democrat, you're not going to be sitting there
Yeah.
plugged into Fox News all day, etc. So you've got quite a divisive media that tailors its content to what it thinks its audience want to hear. And there's the risk, isn't there, of falling into that trap. How do you
Yeah.
avoid that? And do you have a perception that your audience are very mixed in terms of their political views?
Oh yeah, I know for a fact my audience is mixed for sure. Like definitely, left and right. I kind of, I know I don't have extremist viewers on like the left or the right, because you can definitely foster that type of audience, like far right or far left audiences, and I think I pushed them away significantly from my own takes and my own. But yeah, you learn. I feel like I've learned over time um how to navigate that. I mean, I messed up honestly when I first started my stream, because I told my Facebook audience like I said I'm unbiased, basically a robot, like follow me, and I really tried to, have this rose colored lens of being completely just no opinions ever. And that was easy to do when things were burning and like things were on fire and riots. Like you just you're a guy in the middle of violence. Like that's the most unbiased situation you're going to find yourself in. Like guy who doesn't commit violence, or who doesn't is not around violence all the time. Like I was literally just like, what is that? Holy, like I'm like a little kid, So that was probably the most unbiased ever. But then after that, it's like you have the forces of propaganda and the forces of misinformation and disinformation at the same time, which I wasn't ready for. And it came from my own people, or I thought it was my own people. Because like I told you also, like I have a Republican conservative background, and my family and friends all, like I had maybe one or two left leaning friends. Maybe, I have no idea even if they were. Maybe there's a lot of people on the left in social situations like where I live in Minnesota. They might not necessarily publicly say they're left leaning, because it's just kind of how the culture works around here. Like you could be openly conservative and Republican, but you're kind of viewed a little differently if you come out left leaning, whatever. And I found out the hard way, because all I did was just translate what was actually happening, like because I told you it went from riots for a week straight to marching and protesting and chanting. And so then I was like, people in my chat would come in and say, when are the riots start? When are the buildings burning? When are the things like I'm just like, this hasn't happened for a week, because like I kept it going. Like a month would go by, 2 months would go by, and people would still come into my chat, and I'd have to be like, y'all, there's no riots. Like they're marching and chanting. And then people would say, Mercado's so biased now. He is Black Lives Matter. He represents them. I'm like, I'm just telling you what is happening. Like I'm telling you what they're doing. I'm showing you what they're doing because it's a live stream. So even if you mute me, because there would be time I would think I was going through a period where I had to learn all of this and it was all happening to me, but now I get it. There were streams where I didn't even talk, or I wouldn't even say a word. I just streamed the whole thing, didn't say a word. People in the chat would be like, is Mercado okay? Like, and I was just doing an experiment. Like, if I don't say a word, will they still say the same things in my chat? Because I was trying to now see how people would react to what I'm showing. When then it turned into, well, if I have to have a community, and if I'm building a community around what I'm doing, then I can't just have unfettered misinformation and people saying that this is a riot when it's not. And I can't have those people around, because then they're going to piss off the people that are there to watch what I'm doing, and they understand it's not a riot, and they understand it's a protest, or they understand what it is, and they don't want this troll, like being cancerous or whatever. So it's been a lot. It's been a whole transformation of that, because it's not just relaying the information. It's curating a community that's based on truth, and you got to care for that actually. But then also the misinformation and disinformation that's coming in at the same time. It's like I could be out there and stream something and show you, hey, this is a rock or something, or like this is a blade of grass, and then literally misinformation will say, no, it's not. That's a dandelion, or no, it's not. That's the Democrat, that's the globalist WEF agents tricking you into believing it is, or something. I'm like, bro, and people believe this. And people literally believe, like, and it's a equal force, I'd say, when you're given information, misinformation, propaganda is coming at the same time, at the same speed now. And I was learning that in 2020 with my own on the ground reporting. It's one thing when I'm sitting here and I have Google up and Wikipedia or whatever, and people can say, oh, that's just the internet. You can anything on the internet. But when I'm out there in person and I'm on the ground, and I'm like showing a stream, like unedited, and I still had people claiming other things of what was happening. I really had to dig in and understand, okay, what is propaganda? What is misinformation? What is disinformation? And now and that actually led me to Ukraine, which
Yeah.
we'll talk about. But yeah,
It's a good preparation, isn't it, for
yeah,
the informational battle zone, which is Ukraine. But that just gets me this idea that you can see some kind of BS on 4chan or whatever, and that's reality, right? And then, but you can dismiss Wikipedia or something else as being completely made up. I mean, it's a kind of odd thing, but
it is
unfortunately,
odd.
it works, unfortunately, and we see this in Ukraine, which we'll get onto. No matter how nonsensical Russian propaganda seems, it functions at all sorts of levels. So you've got the stuff which is just clear nonsense, which can easily be disproved by people on the ground and evidence and so on. Doesn't stop people spouting it. But what I've slowly come to realize as well is you have a whole other layer, which is academia, foreign policy experts, people writing articles and papers. They've been to Oxford, they've been here, they've been there, and they're well considered in their profession. And you read it and you think like, this is pure nonsense. Not only is it nonsense, it's something that is so transparently beneficial to the Kremlin and its interests. I'm not a conspiracy theory nut, but sometimes you look at stuff, you say, okay, well this particular person here is apparently an expert, has spent the last 10, 15 years saying things that are going to benefit, one dictator or another, but they're able to package it up in an extraordinarily sophisticated way. So it exists on every single level. How do you get into Ukraine then? I mean, was it through the route of propaganda, or is it more through your services background?
So, ironically, it's the same thing. That's why I had to really tell you how I started the BLM stuff with playing Warzone, because obviously the BLM protests and events ended. I actually went to the last big one, which is in 2022. I stuck with that thing to the very end. I stuck with the whole BLM until 2022 in April, and the last event was in no, yeah, because the war was already happening, so it was April, and it was in Michigan. So I was even covering BLM while overlapping the war, because I had started my war coverage already. But I was at home. This was February, and there was no event or anything, no riots or no rallies, nothing. It's 2022. I'm at home, like I am now, playing Madden football. Right? I like the NFL. I'm a diehard Vikings fan here in Minnesota. Like, I love the NFL, so I'm playing it, and I'm actually big audience. Like, I have thousands of viewers. I had 2.2K viewers, which is a lot for video games. Like, if you're playing a video game, that's a lot of people watching you. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm gonna become a video game streamer and just stream video games now, because I'm gonna go with what's working, because that's where I'm at. Like, this is success for me now. It's fine. Like, that was 2 years, almost 2 years of coverage of riots and Like, I'm tired. I'm tired of getting tear gassed and flash banged and all this. The video games are good, so I'm cool with that. But then 24th comes around, and I'm playing, and my chat comes in, and my Madden stream, and they're like, hey, you see Vladimir Putin's speech? I think they're invading Ukraine. I think he's about to invade Ukraine. And I had no idea it was even happening. I wasn't in tune with Ukraine. I wasn't in tune with Russia at all. I was in my own world. It was just a lot of internal US stuff going on. I really was not looking geopolitically at all, like at what was happening in the rest of the world. So I'm like, okay, I guess we have to figure out what's happening, because it was more than one person. It was a lot. Like, it took over my chat kind of, and I had a lot of people watching my football stuff. So I'm like, okay, we'll fire up my news channel, Mercado Media, and I'll just see what's happening on the internet. Like, I don't know what. There's another situation where I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what was happening. I'm playing video games, and here we go again. So I pull up my webcam. I turn on my webcam, pull up Twitter when it was still reliable, before Elon bought it. And there was there's like Putin's speech, and then just a lot of accounts that were verifying that, yeah, Russia's invading, it's happening, here it goes. And so I reacted to Putin's speech with the English subtitles, and I said, well, holy shit. I'm like, what is happening? And then it went to that. And then we pulled up YouTube, and there were CCTV cameras all across Ukraine at the time. There's still some, but this was like they were everywhere though at this time. And I didn't watch the news. We didn't even watch the news. I didn't know what the news was saying about what was happening because we were watching live feeds of the Russians entering Ukraine. Like we were watching their tanks, they had their Soviet flags on, the Z's all over them, BMPs entering. We literally, I was up at, it was 3 a.m. one night, 3 a.m. and like the Russians were staging vehicles and like we literally watched on air of them smash a camera. Like we're watching the feed on YouTube, Russian soldier smashes the camera while I'm watching it live. I'm like, like this is the most like I was out there for 2020, but this I've never seen an invasion live before. Like we were watching it happen. We weren't watching
Well, it's like the
any.
first in history, isn't it? I mean, this is
Yeah,
the most
yeah.
filmed and documented.
One of the most transparent, open source documented wars ever. Yeah. And this is how we watched it. I'd have Maidan feed and St. Michael's feed on because they're in Kyiv, right? So we'd check on Kyiv and we'd have those feeds up, air raid alarms going off on the feed all the time. And every time the air raid alarm would go off, you'd think the worst because there was obviously the 3 days to take Ukraine, and everyone thought that Russians were just gonna come and take Kyiv. Like, so we're watching, like preparing for the worst, like seeing the air raid alarm. Okay, shit, are the Russians coming? Like, holy shit. And we're keeping up to date with the battle map because I use the UA map, the live UA map, and that would have all the geolocated pings of landings or arrivals from missiles in the cities. So we check out, and it just it went from I don't know what I'm doing to okay, live feeds around Ukraine to check the battle map, check the map, and then it really just transformed from there.
And then, of course, you went to Ukraine, and I mean, at some point, it adds the credibility, doesn't it, to actually go there and see it on the ground, meet people, and it adds to the richness of your reporting. And I can see the NAFO, big thing in the background there. And I know from some of your videos,
Oh yeah.
we'll talk about that in a minute because getting the convoys, getting vehicles over, incredibly important. But this ties up with humor, doesn't it? I mean, first of all, you're looking at all this live feed and footage, and it undercuts the propaganda narrative because there is the physical evidence. So it ties in what you've done before, but it's also a very powerful way to tackle propaganda. And then you've got black humor, and NAFO took a little bit of time to get going, but a couple of months into the war, you've got this incredible meme factory based on shit posting, black humor, dark humor, and extremely effective at counting propaganda. So, how did you fit into all that? Did you feel that this is your community here, and you're tuned into their wavelength?
Like I told you, I was out there while riots were happening, making jokes, like cracking jokes while buildings were burning down. I mean, I fed in. Like I'm a veteran. I have the dark humor. We made light out of bad situations, and NAFO really I got onto it before it really even took off. The Georgian Legion was the only way to get a fella. You had to donate to the Georgian Legion. This was like March, I think, of 2022. And I said, okay, I get to donate to an actual Ukrainian unit and I get a cool little fella out of it. So that's what happened. I donated to the Georgian Legion. They made me a fella and it was great. Now it's like you can get fellas in multiple
Oh
sources
yeah,
now, but the
I got
only
mine
way at the,
April, so yeah, I got
yeah,
my Georgian Legion
yeah,
donation
that's
there,
the
and it was
true
screenshot. Yeah.
OG NAFO fellas got theirs from the Georgian Legion because they were the only ones doing it at first. So yeah, I had mine in a Vikings jersey, a Justin Jefferson jersey with a HIMARS behind him. It was awesome. But it really counters the Russian propaganda because Russian propaganda relies on people not just even looking into something. Like they truly treat the people receiving this propaganda as stupid, and it works because people are not intelligent, or even just look beyond the surface layer of a headline. Like they will take the headline and run with it, and Russia knows that. So they're like, okay, we'll put a title on there with just a whole bunch of garbage in the actual story, but they're not going to read that. So that's really what it was the live, like seeing Russia do what they were doing to Ukraine live without any type of a filter, whether it be US media or any type of a media. It was literally just Ukraine CCTV camera pointing it at Russian tanks, watching them enter. Like they called it a special operation. They didn't even call it a war. You were going to get put in jail if you called it a war. And like, this is insane. We're seeing it happen with our own eyes. So it really undercut everything the Russian propaganda was doing. And the people that were in tune with what was happening with Ukraine, the Russian propaganda was never able to work on them because from day one, they were watching Russians enter Ukraine. So even just the "we're not at war with Ukraine" propaganda, which is what Russia started with, didn't even take hold, let alone all their other narratives and revisionist history that they have going on for Ukraine. But it was just the "we're not at war with Ukraine," but then people were live watching Russians enter the country. That was it. Like, Russian propaganda was never going to take hold with the majority of people following the war, which is
And at the
good.
same time, Ukraine's full of Nazis, even though the president is Jewish, and
Jewish.
all this kind of lies on such a monstrous scale and told with such sort of no embarrassment whatsoever. And it really does recall the kind of Goebbels line, isn't it? It's like the bigger the lie, the more believable it's going to be. You have to tell that lie with absolute conviction and belief. You can't deviate or apologize. You just got to, once you start on that route of lying, you've got to go big and keep
Yeah.
going. And if the Russians are showing one thing, I mean, apart from dying like flies, at the behest of their incompetent commanders. The other thing I think it demonstrated in 2 years is their ability to lie, and unfortunately, the lies are more effective than their battlefield tactics, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Their propaganda is their hybrid warfare. They fight with that because their military is not good. Right? No strategy. Their military strategy is absolutely not working. Even their meat grinder strategy of trying to overwhelm Ukrainian defenses isn't working now at this current stage where we're at. It's not working. So they're not who we thought they were. They aren't the second military of the world. They just are a giant country with nuclear power. That's what it is. And then
And
propaganda.
and of course, unlike US, unlike Europe and other countries, the value placed on individual life doesn't seem to be nearly as great. Even though, and this is the tragic bit, because I speak Russian, and you see interviews with people, and you know many do support the military operation, but you also get many people who they'll go along to the recruitment office because this can't be right because this isn't legal. I've got a disability or something. And there are a lot of people actually that trust and believe still, despite all the evidence, in their leaders. And they trust and believe in the kind of myths that have been created to keep them compliant. And one small part of me has a tiny amount of pity for them. Doesn't last very long, but just to naively to go to your deaths and get sucked up into these myths and believe that your leaders are working in your own best interest. I mean, quite clearly, they couldn't care less about these individuals at all.
No, it's their numbers. It's literally just numbers. They don't have any moral code, nothing. I mean, they have the belief, right? The Ruski Dusha, where they're born into this holiness and they have this power, and like you die, you become ultimate or something. I don't know the after you death for the belief, but I know you're in Russian belief, you're born into this holy of holies, and so they don't care. They don't actually care about life on this planet. You're a number, and you're gonna go die for whatever the Kremlin wants. At least that's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd go to parties, I'd go to people's houses, and in the 90s, this is before Putin and all this, and I'd be told by some people who that oh, it's such a shame that your soul isn't the same as ours, and you're not going to be going to a good place when you pass on, and they'd say that with some degree of pity, and yeah, then when they found out that I thought the whole thing was made up, then they were quite horrified. But no, there is this exceptionalism. There's this belief that somehow, this Russian superiority, um, despite all the evidence to the contrary. And then there's Ukraine. Ukraine seems to me to be very different characteristics. And one of the chief characteristics of the Russian Orthodox religion is supposed to be humility. Well, that's not a word you tend to associate with too many Russians. I mean, I know some who do exhibit those characteristics, and I've got friends and now sort of acquaintances through running the channel who are, humble, generous, empathetic, and so on. But unfortunately, en masse, that's not one of the characteristics. Ukrainians, however, strike me as actually having an extraordinary degree of humility, despite the incredible achievements and the fact they've held the Russians off with such extraordinary bravery. There seems to be a sort of, yeah, there seems to be some kind of reserve there, humility, dark humor as well. I mean, but what's your impression of because you knew nothing about Ukrainians and obviously it's been a bit of a learning curve. So what
Yeah,
impression have you formed of the country and the people?
that's exactly. I mean, you nailed it on the head. Humility, being humble, thankfulness. I mean, I turned 30 years old in Ukraine. And we were out walking around, and a group of young Ukrainians were like, "What are you doing here?" Like to me and my buddy Alex, who's from the UK, and we said, "Oh, we're here to deliver trucks and aid and drones." And like, "Oh fuck, oh my, thank you so." Like they just thanked us for like 5 minutes in a row. I'm like, "Oh my good, like this is I've never been thanked like this for something like this before." I'm just trying to go about my day and do what I do. I'm bad at receiving compliments and thanks and all that. So I'm just like, thanks. Yeah, we'll continue. We'll do the best we can. We'll keep bringing more. But they were pure at that though. Humility, honor, integrity, all the basically the army values that I was learning when I was in the military. I learned that a lot of Ukrainians have that. Traditional values, very traditional, which makes me mad because a lot of people in the U.S. I don't know, I don't want to pivot too much, but people in the U.S. politically are having issues with internal politics, and those that should be for Ukraine, that are for traditional family values and more conservative-ish type, that it would be the support for Ukraine, but unfortunately, due to Russian propaganda and also our internal nonsense, I don't know, I don't know if it's an internal U.S. thing where they act this the I'm just gonna say it, the MAGA Republicans. I don't know if they actually aren't for traditional values and they're just saying they are and they're just populists, or they really are and they're not receiving the message that hey, Ukraine is this traditional like family values, work hard, agriculture, farmland, like it really is that. It's just
Mm.
and you really feel it there, and you feel appreciated. You feel like you're putting in the work. It's just a society and a culture that I grew up thinking that that's what life was going to be here in the U.S. I guess it can be, but I really felt it more so when I was in Ukraine. Like, oh man, this is like what I was raised to like think life was going to be like this traditional lifestyle. You get a wife and then you have a house and then you have a chickens or something. Like, but this is a reality for Ukrainians. Like you have like a plot of land and like you tend to that plot of land and you can give back to the village that you live in. And like this is all what Ukraine is about. And it was just a really, really good experience to experience that. But also like that's what I thought life was going to be, but I had to go to Ukraine to see it.
That's the extraordinary thing, isn't it? Because Ukrainians, as well as, and I got this impression in Lviv as well. I know there's different areas and there's different characteristics, but what really struck me in Lviv, we went out into the countryside after we'd done the event, and there's a brilliant guy there called Arest Zub. He took us out into the countryside and went to
Oris
his
is cool.
dacha. Oh, Arest is good. Yeah, he's absolutely brilliant. So we went out into the countryside. Johnny FD was there, and we just drove around, kind of exploring and finding stuff, and it was. People to meet, stuff to do, and go and find some really sort of fresh, untainted food as well, which we did. Um, but what struck me was the little houses in the village. Um, Everything was so neat. Obviously you have
Mm,
some houses that are a little better off than others, but
mhm.
generally they're all in the same kind of size and scale. So no one's really kind of showing off. You don't get these big houses surrounded by high security walls and whatever, which you get all over Russia. When everyone's got money, they build big walls around themselves to protect it because, if you stole it, someone's going to come and steal it from you. So there's this
Mm,
this this kind of, I would call it a sort of almost thieves culture there, or
damn.
distrust if you want to be
Yeah.
less judgmental. It's a distrusting. Whereas here in Ukraine, all the gardens pretty much were neat. Some are super cultivated, some are a little rougher, but they're all really, nicely kept. And the fruit trees, I pointed this out to Arrest. He was like, of course no one's going to come in and steal the fruit. I'm like, well, you say that, but if this was some Russian villages, like, that tree, if you left your house alone for the weekend, you'd
Well,
come
even
back
just
and it wouldn't be
also
there.
sim also as simple too is I would translate it to Americans. Like I would go for walks in Ukraine in Kyiv, which is a major city, massive city, at 10 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. I can't do that here, even in the US. I can't go for a walk in my neighborhood at 9, 10 o'clock at night. It's You got people that are out there doing things that are, like thievery or, committing violence. It's just not a safe time to be outside walking in the United States where I live. Now, there are places in the US where you absolutely can. But Kyiv is a major city. I wouldn't go walking in downtown Minneapolis. I would not go walking in St. Paul, which is a safer city, but I just would not go in a major city at 9, 10 o'clock at night for a walk. But in Kyiv, though, absolutely. You can go for a walk whenever you want. You can go for a walk, like obviously within the curfew due to the Russians, but before curfew, though, you can go for a walk, and you're fine. You're safe. You're not going to get mugged. You're not going to get, you're not going to have a thief come up to you or anything. It was
And
a great experience.
yeah, that's fantastic, and yeah, unfortunately, you have to bars and stuff are closed down at a certain time. You got to get off the streets. But the MAGA thing, because I think when I first put the channel out, I did a couple of episodes about Trump, and I very quickly realized that actually this sounds like a complete contradiction. That there are pro-Ukraine MAGA people,
Hmm.
and actually my channel had quite a few, and actually they were extremely engaged in debate and comments and so on. And of course, when I throw these lines out about Trump, which seems sort of natural to me, because I still, I find him vaguely entertaining, but I find him also very threatening. I'm
Hmm.
completely honest about that. Not a big fan, and but I realized that I have to sort of moderate my language. I have to use evidence. I have to. I'm not. We're all here for Ukraine, so I'm not going to alienate people.
Hmm.
But if there's propaganda there or something I feel is dangerous, well, I'll kind of call it out. And I actually had quite a constructive debate with many of them, and we explained our points of view usually a relatively polite way. So it got me thinking that actually there probably are a huge number of really, normal, as you say, decent people with strong sense of values or value systems. Um, but it seems to me that the guys at the top are clearly on some kind of grift, but they've managed to convince people that they are genuine and they share those same values with them. Um, and that's one of the tragedies there, because you say Ukrainians have this incredible yearning for freedom.
Hmm.
They have a distrust of their leaders, and they have a distrust of leaders because they have a lot of leaders who are on a bit of a grift, and they kind of they're tuned into to spotting
Yep.
that. It would seem to me that the Ukrainians are made for more traditional, Reagan-esque or Republican values, but there's this strange kind of rift that's been created.
Yeah, it's the populism of it, right? I think that's what it really is we're not, it's not so much the voters is what I've noticed. It's not so much like regular, like somebody that supports Trump, for example, like that, but most of those people probably also support Ukraine, but it's the political leaders, right? Those that hold power, like our Speaker of the House or the House of Representatives that have the Freedom Caucus, the actual MAGA politicians that spin the narratives for the voters. And that's the problem, is those that are getting power within that and then spinning things for reasons that I am still trying to figure out. Like I went to Congress in September to try to advocate for this big bill that we're trying to get through that has Israel southern border and Ukraine on it. There was a unitary attackums on it, or unitary attackums bill, expedited F-16 training. It was a great experience. Like I was like, oh wow, I get to go to DC and actually advocate for Ukraine in a meaningful way. But now we're waiting for that still to get through, and it seems like it's like Twitter propagandists and the MAGA wing of the politicians that are keeping it back. I'm not, yeah, because I have a ton of people that definitely support Trump that support Ukraine as well. Um, it's, I think what it is also too is they're not being honest with what their plans are for Ukraine either. They're kind of leaving it like, you know what I mean? Like Trump is like, I have this magical 24-hour fix. I would like to see what that plan is. What does that entail? Like, give me some idea of what that looks like. But that, just saying that, I think also keeps the MAGA Trump supporters still in like supportive of Ukraine, which I guess is a good thing. That's good. But at some point, we're going to need to know what this plan is. If he's got this magical fix, I have an idea of what that fix is, but I don't, I only say it when it comes up. Like, I don't want to like upset people too early with what I think that plan is. I'm hoping Trump comes out and says what it is himself.
I mean, it's one of two ways, isn't it? Well, three
Yeah.
ways. One way is to do absolutely nothing and sit on the fence as it is currently. The other way, of course, is to simply bring the house down and crash NATO and hand Europe to the Russians. I mean,
Mhm.
that's one option there, and I think that's the one. Those of us who instinctively look at Trump think nothing good can come of this. That's the one we think that's what he's going to do. But it's not necessarily the case. I mean, I've heard an alternative version, which he has a quiet word with Putin and says, okay, withdraw from Ukraine, in 2 weeks' time or whatever. And if you don't, we'll give Ukraine literally everything it needs to eject you. And that's a version I've heard. And that could work. That's a show of will and a show of force, which Putin would understand. Um, but I doubt whether he'll reveal the plan until the last minute.
Yeah, I don't think he will. But and I also judge my assessment of what I think his plan will be based off his own actions, like Trump trying to pull us out of NATO, cozying up to Putin himself personally. It's just things that have happened while he was the president that lead me to believe that this magical 24-hour plan is just Putin keeps hold of the territories. But there's a ceasefire though. No more war, no more fighting, right? Which is crazy because Ukraine's not going to accept that, right? Ukraine's not going to be like, we're not, no. But in his mind, in his theory, that's what the 24-hour peace plan is. And that's obviously not good. But what are ways that you with your channel, I'm going to flip it back to like explain that to mega Trump supporters, or are you going along those lines?
It's tricky, you know. I the linkage I'm trying to create here is because there's a continuity, I think, between Russia's behavior. Um, there's some continuity with Tsarist times, but there's definitely a lot of continuity with Soviet times and the kind of brutality of Stalin and so on. So I try to make those historical connections and say, look, this guy, Putin, this espousal of so-called, Orthodox Christian values, the so-called morality, which you think you're actually closer to than, the Democrat values, etc. I just try to unpick that and say, no, this is all BS. This is all invented stuff. This is the same entity which the US managed to lead the world to crash it and bring that system down. And I think history is showing that despite the terrible things that went on, despite some of the terrible disasters, Vietnam and others are fairly catastrophic. Broadly speaking, however, what America managed to do was provide an extraordinary backbone in standing up to the Soviet Union and sort of holding the tide of what I think of, is the zombie apocalypse, which is not even communism, but Russian power, control, and influence taking over and spreading its tentacles. And what you've got now is similar, except it's even more pernicious in that, strangely, the Soviet Union did have boundaries and limits as to what it was prepared to do. And it even had, in a weird way, a kind of, I wouldn't call it morality, but we will do this kind of thing, but this kind of thing is beyond the pale because we still want to be thought of as a civilized entity. Today's Russia doesn't care. I mean, nothing is off the table.
That's what it seems like. It seems just like a society, like you said, zombie apocalypse type society. It's just keep you uninformed, keep you ignorant. Lots of alcoholism, right? Lots of drinking, and the supreme commander knows all, does all, and that's not I have no idea why people in the West are looking to that as some type of an alternative because they don't like Western policies, or which is fine, right? Now, our policies, we're not perfect in the West. We don't have every policy we have isn't perfect. We aren't like a utopia. However, our system is far better than Russia's system, which is supreme commander at the top. Nobody does no, he does no wrong, and then the rest of the society just kind of falls in, and also the lowest are the low, and it doesn't really there isn't really much opportunity there, like individual growth, individual opportunity. I know I couldn't start a media biz company, an LLC, or a media company in Russia, and I have an LLC. I pay taxes, like I have a business to do what I do. I couldn't start an independent media and just talk about whatever I want in Russia, criticize Putin, criticize the government or whatever if there's a bad choice. I criticize Biden, I criticize my own state government all the time here on my stream. And I'm glad I live in a country where I can do that. I'm glad I live in a place where I have the freedom of speech to do so.
You'd be hauled out. You'd be hauled out long
Yeah.
ago and
Oh
dragged
yeah.
dragged off. Which
Yep.
and even as they're finding out now, even guys who very much were a part of that Russian elite and the propagandist, if they just go too extreme, or if they create a profile that's too big, or they go off script, as it were. I mean, I'm thinking of Prigozhin here, went a little bit off script, with his mutiny. But Vladimir Tatarsky, the Z blogger who got blown up by a bust of
Mm,
himself. If you develop any kind of idea that you're an independent agent and you're going to go off script and do your own thing, well, that's it. You're
you're
kind
done.
of curtains. Um, and Ukraine is different, isn't it? So, I mean, one of the criticisms here is like, don't fight for Ukraine because it's not perfect, or they're still developing their democracy and institutions. Well, we all are. I mean, all our democracies are a work in progress.
Yeah.
And I think what you said is key there. It's like, can you affect change? If you want to go out and change something, and a lot of people don't want to do that, but if you want to, are you going to get arrested and beaten for doing that, or do you have a chance of doing that? And I think that's what makes Ukraine similar to us, in that there's the potential to effect change and progress.
And even too, even while I was there on Krishatik, people were holding rallies and little protests like against the own government for like money not getting to the soldiers or too much money being sent to a certain ministry. I believe I was explaining they were having protests out there. And that's Western as hell. It's something that we do over here. And they were doing it without police around or beating anyone or anything like you could see in Russia. You try to gather for even an anti-war rally, you're done.
This is
Meanwhile,
it.
meanwhile in Ukraine, you had propagandists, and we could go in tangent on that, but you had for like Gonzalo Lira there for a year, unfettered propaganda, taking pictures of missile positions, and the SBU didn't go after him for a year. They gave him every opportunity to stop doing what he was doing before they went and got him. So
They
it's just a
gave him
completely
multiple warnings as well, didn't they? He
multiple
was told you got to cease, and
multiple before, and then yeah, he got what was coming to him, but it's just night and day difference, let alone me, right? I'm going to use myself as an example. I'm from the United States. I'm not Ukrainian. I don't have a Ukrainian media company. However, I went to Ukraine and was doing interviews with people and talking to people and seeing things and recording things and filming and editing, and I didn't have the SBU contact me once. I didn't have any government agency say, "Hey, stop," or "Hey, you need approval for this," or it was nothing like that. It was amazing. I was like, man, I can't wait to get back and do some more journalism because it's just such a, I mean, it's what we have here. Like I can go out in my home city and go and interview someone or make some news, go and talk to a restaurant and see what they're up to. I can do the same thing in Ukraine.
yeah, and that's very powerful. And again, I didn't know what to expect, but we're out there in Lviv doing the event, recording stuff, and yeah, I mean, quite the opposite of having the SBU or someone coming and knocking on the door. Um, we had the mayor popping up and saying, "All right, we heard you're in town. Do you wanna come and do an interview in the town hall?" And so we were in Lviv, in the mayor's building, doing a nice little interview on his balcony in the center of the town. And I think that also shows that individual politicians have the ability to create their own agendas and make a difference. Even if they're not part of the same party of the as the president and so on. So that was a great sort of experience there. Um, we'll wrap on a minute, but what's your plans for going back? Have you got any trips on the horizon?
I want to do another NAFO convoy. That's kind of what got me into Ukraine to begin with. I wouldn't have gone to Ukraine physically. I didn't even have any plan to go to Ukraine until after the war. That's what most people say. I'll go to Ukraine after the war, and I really hope they do. But I was definitely saying that. I did have plans to, but I didn't have any clear plans. But here it came, fundraising opportunity with my YouTube channel because I cover the war every night on my channel. So it went from fundraising for corporate nonprofits, and because you can do that on YouTube, you can pull up a fundraiser and pick a nonprofit and fundraise for it at any time, which is a great feature. But I didn't know if Ukraine was receiving all of that money. Like YouTube for sure takes a cut, the CEO of the nonprofit gets a cut, the employees get a cut, like, and it's just natural, right? That's how you keep the nonprofit alive. But it's, how much of that money is Ukraine really getting at the end of the day after it's touched so many hands? So we switched over to trying to find fundraisers and direct help, like direct aid to the soldiers on the ground. And the NAFO 69 Sniffing Brigade was the one where you can fundraise a truck and then you can see it hand off to the soldiers, and the whole process is, okay, this is transparent as hell. And so then we started with that. Now I did 4 convoys last year. So 4 trips from Tallinn to Kyiv, 30 hours at least of driving. And I want to do one more. So that way I've done a convoy in every season in Ukraine. So I want to do a springtime convoy.
Fantastic. Well, let me know when that's kicking off. We're trying to get vehicles, four by four vehicles in London that are about to be scrapped because they don't meet the pollution requirements anymore. Hundreds of vehicles, and these are perfect because
Mhm.
vehicles don't last that long, do they? At the
No.
front, a couple of months, and they're shot to pieces. So these would be absolutely ideal. And I know there's quite a bit of lobbying at the moment. So I would expect quite a big, hopefully a big convoy of 4x4 setting off from London at some point in the next couple of months. Fingers crossed. And yeah, hopefully they can get a few NAFO graphics done on some of those. That would raise a good bit of awareness because this story, I mean, in Britain there's far less of this party, but they haven't turned Ukraine into a political football here.
Mm.
There's only really some extreme elements, I would say, on the left that are calling for peace, as in
Mhm.
let Russia do what it will.
Right. Right.
But generally speaking, the consensus, I think, is, something like 80-90% support of Ukraine, and it's not a political debating point at all, which is good. It's just the bureaucracy, like these vehicles are going to be scrapped. That's just kind of bureaucracy and regulations getting in the way. But if we can overcome that, that would be a good thing.
I think we have issues in the United States. I don't know. I think we have a couple problems going on. But yeah, I, I'm with rose-colored lenses. I would say the people of the US, like regular people, strong percentage support Ukraine, like the majority still. It's the political, like you said, political football and the politicians right now and playing games. And I think it's also Russian influence over American politicians as well.
Yeah, well, this is I think what we're doing with our channels. We're trying to present an alternative version of reality. It's not hopefully tainted by associations with large commercial media and their editorial biases, their stakeholders and funders. So the kind of independent media you're doing is, I think, incredibly important. And this is why I put out, like you are, a video a day, because you have to create something people are going to tune into. You have to create an alternative view of reality to counter what is 24/7 propaganda.
Yeah, the 24-hour news cycle is now the 24-hour propaganda cycle. What was a good idea maybe in the past has turned into a nightmare.
Well, good luck with everything you're doing there, and Leah, let us know when you're going to be in the area, as it were, well, within a couple of thousand kilometers,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah, especially with the convoy kicking off, that's something I think that would be very powerful to get involved in that.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for having me and interview. It was a great interview. It's always good to go back and over my own history of what we've done and reflect on it. And it provides me a clear picture of what I want to do in the future now. So I do significantly appreciate these conversations and having me on.
No, me too. This has been lots of fun talking here, and I've got a lot of insights out of it. I'm very grateful to Operator Starsky, who kindly did the introductions and
Yes, he did.
recommended we have a chat. He wasn't wrong there.
No, not at all. Shout out to Operator Starsky for this one for sure.
Well, this is brilliant. This is going up on Sunday, so that's when people will see it. And yeah, I look forward to catching up again.
All right, Jonathan.
All
Thank you
right.
so much. All
Cheers.
right.
Have a good evening.
Cheers.